together, I try and ask kind of didactic questions here to get people brainstorming. I'm a bit hesitant to do that here in this virtual format. I think we're trying to record this. I don't know how that would come across. So maybe we can experiment with it a little as I kind of get warmed up and used to it. But I think you guys are mostly stuck listening to me for the next 2 hours, more so than we would have been if we do this in person. So come back next year, and you can come back as alumni and have the full experience, and that'll be something.
And I do want to jump in and let everyone know, as Deacon just alluded to, this session is being recorded. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, and so then the other thought I have is so this is really church history, and history is an interesting topic. It's one that you know, I never actually cared that much for it until probably after I finished my undergraduate studies. Right, I didn't really start enjoying history until you know, at least my mid-20s, I think, and I think a lot of people have a similar experience. Right, like high school history is hard for a lot of people. It's tough to kind of make sense of it, especially when we're young. But one of the things I found that's particularly special is understanding like how history is made, and a big part of that, especially for church historians, is getting a chance to look at these primary texts. And so, to be perfectly honest, if you guys want to read a history book on the church, there are perfectly good ones. Callistos Ware publishes, you know, there's that The Orthodox Church is a great history book. I have a couple more in this handout that will get you guys that you know, that also do a wonderful job covering this you know, developmental period in church history. And really, the truth is, in 2 hours, you could get much deeper through a textbook, or you know, through reading something like that, than I could possibly, you know, talk through in a lecture format. So I'm not going to try. Instead, I'd like to kind of step back and understand where all of these historians are getting their information, and look at that together. I think that kind of seeing how that process works is really special, right? It's something unique. It's one thing for me to rattle off all these points of, you know, starting with the book of Acts, we had bishops and deacons, and, you know, Paul talks about bishops and deacons. Like, that's one thing, but to stop and actually look at the text and work through them is, I think a little more sublime, and at least it's the best I can offer you guys. So that'll be the approach. So we'll start from the beginning, and we'll look at the birth of the church, mission and structure, and we'll kind of I'm kind of shooting toward using the first Ecumenical Council in Nicaea in 325 as really a watershed moment, because I think if we look at where the church gets to in 325, it's really an extraordinary thing, right? So 325, this is a year after Constantine has reunited a fractured Roman Empire. He sends out an invitation to invite bishops of this Christian faith to come together and have this big assembly. And he sends out invitations. I think they suggested he has invited 1,800 bishops, right? So he invites 1,800 bishops, 300 come, 318 bishops actually come. But for the fact that in 300 years, there's this faith that's grown from this, you know, obscure, you know, faith of villagers and fishermen in Jerusalem to 300 years later, this is becoming a dominant faith in the Roman Empire. It's made it all the way to Spain and Brittany. It's all the way around the northern side of Africa, into the Arabian Peninsula, and it's, you know, it's a firmly established belief across Rome in just 300 years' time. That's really amazing. And so then Constantine brings all these bishops together, and they undertake this task of really establishing you know, an Orthodox faith, a true faith, and drawing some rather hard lines in the sand of what we do and don't believe. And so the work to get to there is what I'd really like to look at. And then after that, you guys will have a chance next week to focus more on how the church develops after. And the other cool thing is that when we get to 325, there's a lot of the structure that we still have today in Orthodoxy. A lot of that structure already exists. The liturgy isn't the same. The iconography isn't there yet. The hymnography isn't fully developed yet. But the basic structure's there. We're already seeing. There's already the development of a creed, right? There's a creedal statement that's issued. There's a firm understanding of martyrdom, asceticism, and this whole idea of monasticism is really starting to bloom. The church hierarchy is already there. So really, yeah. So in many ways, that's a significant point in the first 300 years, and so that's what we'll look at. So we will start at the best place I could think of, which is Acts chapter 2. Acts chapter 2 is really a foundational text to understand where the church begins. This is a rather long passage, and so I'm just going to take off reading, and you guys should be able to see it on my screen. And obviously this is the Bible, so if you guys want to follow along in yours, this should be yes, this is the RSV version of it. And oops. Okay, so Acts chapter 2, verses 1 through 47. When the day of Pentecost had come, they were all gathered together in one place. And suddenly a sound came from heaven like the rush of the mighty wind, and it filled all the house where they were sitting. And there appeared to them tongues of fire, distributed and resting on each one of them. And they were all filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other tongues as the Spirit gave them utterance. Now there were dwelling in Jerusalem Jews, devout men from every nation under heaven. And at this sound the multitude came together, and they were bewildered, because each one of them had heard them speaking in his own language. And they were amazed and wondered, saying, are not all these who are speaking Galileans? And how is it that we hear each of us in his own native language? Parthians and Medes and Elamites and residents of Mesopotamia, Judea, Cappadocia, Pontus and Asia, Phrygia, Pamphylia, Egypt, and the parts of Libya belonging to Cyrene. The visitors from Rome, both Jews and proselytes, Cretans and Arabians, we hear them all telling in our own language. We hear them telling in our own tongues the mighty works of God. And all were amazed and perplexed, saying to one another, what does this mean? The others mocking said they are filled with new wine. But Peter, standing with the 11, lifted up his voice and addressed them. Men of Judea and all who dwell in Jerusalem, let this be known to you, and give ear to my words. For these men are not drunk as you suppose, since it is only the third hour of the day. But this is what was spoken by the prophet Joel. And in the last days it shall be, God declares, that I will pour out my spirit upon all my men servants and my maidservants in these days. In those days I will pour out my spirit, and they shall prophesy. And I will show wonders in the heaven above, and signs in the earth beneath, blood and fire and vapor of smoke, and the sun shall be turned to darkness and the moon into blood, before the day of the Lord comes, the great and manifest day. And it shall be that whoever calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. Men of Israel, hear these words. Jesus of Nazareth, a man attested to you by God with mighty works and wonders and signs which God did through him in your midst, as you yourselves know. This Jesus, delivered up according to the definite plan and foreknowledge of God, you crucified and killed by the hands of lawless men. But God raised him up, having loosed the pangs of death, because it was not possible for him to be held by it. For David says concerning him, I saw the Lord always before me, for he is at my right hand, that I may not be shaken. Therefore my heart was glad and my tongue rejoiced, moreover my flesh will dwell in hope. For thou wilt not abandon my soul to Hades, nor let thy Holy One see corruption. Thou hast made it known to me the ways of life. Thou wilt make me full of gladness with thy presence. Brethren, I say to you confidently that the patriarch David, that he both died and was buried, and his tomb is with us to this day. Being therefore a prophet, and knowing that God has sworn with an oath to him that he would set one of his descendants upon his throne, he foresaw and spoke of the resurrection of the Christ, that he was not abandoned to Hades, nor did his flesh see corruption. This Jesus God raised up, and of that we are all witnesses. Being therefore exalted at the right hand of God, and having received from the Father the promise of the Holy Spirit, he has poured out this which you see and hear. For David did not ascend into the heavens, but he himself says, the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand, till I make thy enemies a stool for thy feet. Let all the house of Israel therefore know assuredly that God has made him both Lord and Christ, this Jesus whom you crucified. Now when they heard this, they were cut to the heart, and Peter said to the rest of the apostles, brethren, what shall we do? And Peter said to them, repent, and be baptized, every one of you, in the name of Jesus Christ, for the forgiveness of your sins, and you shall receive the gift of the Holy Spirit. For the promise is to you and to your children, and all that are far off, every one whom the Lord our God calls to him. And he testified with many other words, and exhorted them, saying, save yourselves from this crooked generation. All right, so I'll pause here for a minute before I finish this passage. Okay, so this is Peter's first big speech in Acts. This is on the day of Pentecost, and this is really the start of the church, right? So we're looking at several weeks after Jesus was crucified and rose from the dead. Now he's ascended into heaven, and the disciples are kind of left to their own means, and so they have this event here. Tongues of fire come down on their heads, and then Peter gives this really remarkable speech. Now, what's really remarkable is that this speech that Peter gives is really the gospel in miniature. And the reason that I read this long passage is because this really is not just the church's birth, but this really is the church's mission. I think is to understand that the church's job is to protect and preserve, and especially to proclaim the gospel, right? And this is how it is. This is the kerygma, the public teaching. And so, from this point on, the message continually grows. It changes shape for different audiences. Eventually, within a generation or so, we have written accounts of it, and eventually we have the 4 gospel books that we all know. But this is really the start, and Peter's message really touches on several foundational points in the gospel message. One of the things that Peter does is he gives a little bit of narrative biographical information about Jesus's life. This is part of the gospel narrative, is understanding that Jesus is a man, right? That he's from Nazareth. What did he say? Mighty in word and deed, right? Kind of mentions that he was a miracle worker. So kind of that biological setting for Christ is part of the story. Another foundational part here, and we'll look at this a bit more, is that not only is this a narrative about a person's life, but Peter is clearly explaining that this is the fulfillment of Scripture, that Jesus Christ is the fulfillment of Scripture. He sees this in 2 senses. He talks about David, and he quotes the Psalms and says that this is a fulfillment of David's prophecy in the Psalms. And then he also he cites the prophet Joel, right? Talks about these predictions of the last days, how things shall be. Goes on to that description that sounds like San Francisco during the wildfires a couple weeks ago, with the moon turning into blood and darkness in the daytime. But really though, taking snippets from the prophets and from the Psalms and showing that Jesus Christ is the fulfillment of all these things. This is really how the gospel message is constructed. And if you guys were to challenge yourselves and try and write your own miniature gospel, these would be elements you would do. You would want to include. It almost goes without saying that Peter talks about both the crucifixion and the resurrection. Both parts are part of the story. You can't really have one without the other, but both get mentioned. And in this case, because the audience is Jews, because the audience are faithful Jews, Peter so kindly blames them for Jesus's death. It's a little harsh because there's a lot of visitors from rather far off, right? They've all come to Jerusalem for the feast of Pentecost, for the giving of the law, and so none of them really had anything to do with Jesus's trial, but still, right? Peter is assigning personal responsibility here. This he does. This happens a few times during the book of Acts in speeches to the Jews. Jesus's death is kind of laid at their feet as having responsibility. When the message is preached to the Gentiles, this seems to drop away. So that's a bit of a curiosity, but it does feature, right? Is understanding our role in things. That these things aren't happening in the abstract, but that we're part of the world, whether we're Jews or Gentiles. We're part of that story. Okay, other features here. I'm scanning back through the text. I guess you guys can see that I'm scanning back through the text. And so then at the end of this message, then there's a call to action, and this is really important. So what is the call to action? Repent and be baptized. Repent and be baptized. Which the baptism is really a sacramental realization of that repentance and that washing. But these things, right there at the beginning. So here's this faith, here's this discussion about Jesus Christ. He's somehow convinced these people that Jesus is the Son of God and their Messiah and worth worshiping. And so what do? Repent and be baptized. This is still the same expectation to this day for all of us Christians. When we have an encounter with Christ, our first encounter with Christ, the expectation is that we be baptized. I suspect that many of us were baptized as children, so that decision was kind of made on our behalf. But still, this is the practice, right? So, right from day one, so to speak, this is how you enter the church, is through the rite of baptism. Okay, so then after that, I'll finish this passage. So at verse 41, so those who received the word were baptized, and there were added that day about 3,000 souls, and they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. And fear came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were done through the apostles. And all who believed were together and all had things in common. And they sold their possessions and goods and distributed them all as any had need. And day by day, attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes, they partook of food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to their number day by day those who were being saved. Right. So again, here we're seeing kind of the fruits of Peter's initial speech and of the early labors of the church. And again, we can't read too much into the language of the New Testament, but it's important to note some highlights. So they've devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and fellowship, both of which still feature prevalently in Christian living and Christian worship, right? Like this is still a process of teaching and fellowship, to the breaking of bread and prayers. That's really what we do. The Sunday liturgy, or the Mass, the Eucharistic service really is a ritualized form of all of those things, right? Teaching and fellowship, breaking of bread and prayers. And so then, in this setting now, Christians are all living in common. They have sort of this commune arrangement that seems to work for them at that time. Obviously, we've moved away from that now. Most Christian experiences are not communal like this anymore. But then also notice, day by day, they're attending the temple together, again, breaking bread in their homes, partaking of food with a glad and generous heart, and always praising God and having favor with those people. So this is it, right? So this is the birth of the church. And like I said, without trying to, interpolate too much back into the book of Acts, already we can see that, there's kind of this structure, this real picture of Christian life that fundamentally hasn't changed. I think it's become more ritualized now. This seems more organic, to use kind of a buzzy word, but still it's there. Whether or not we've ritualized it doesn't change the reality that we have worship, teaching, prayers, and breaking of bread and communal meals. Okay, so that's the book of Acts. I said that I'd talk a little more about this understanding of the significance of Scripture, and Paul is an excellent source for this. His first epistle to the Corinthians, he touches on this point. In chapter 15, he says in the first 4 verses, "Now I would remind you, brethren, in what terms I preached to you the gospel which you received and in which you stand, by which you are saved if you hold it fast, unless you believed in vain. For I delivered to you as of first importance what I also received, that Christ died for our sins in accordance with the Scriptures, that he was buried and he was raised on the third day in accordance with the Scriptures." So this is a short passage, and Paul goes on from there. But this insistence, I think most of us, our Christianity, even if I'm almost certain that most of you aren't Orthodox Christians. That's certainly how past classes have been set up, and that's fine. But most Christians nowadays, we have a pretty narrow understanding of Christianity, and I don't think any of us are likely to object to this idea. So much so almost that we take it for granted and don't realize that Paul's really putting a stake in the ground here, that staking our faith and staking Christ's reality and his death and resurrection to the Old Testament becomes so pivotal. And I say that because it didn't have to be that way. It didn't have to be that way. It sounds nonsensical to us, but we certainly could have confessed to Christ, who is a new God. Right? This was a choice to see Christ as fulfilling the Old Testament. I would argue that it's certainly the right choice. Paul argues that, but in fact, about 100 years after this writing, there was in fact a bishop who went to the Church of Rome, and his name was Marcian, and he taught exactly that, right? He taught this whole idea that that Jesus Christ was a new God, right? That the God of the New Testament was not the God of the Old Testament. And it's a really easy argument to make if you read the books and you want to see that. You have this kind of wrathful, vengeful God in the Old Testament, and this merciful, just, kind, forgiving God of the New Testament. And so this priest Marcian really played up this idea, and so that was his theory, right? Is we can get rid of the Old Testament. We don't need all those old books. We don't really need 4 Gospels either. We'll just stick with Luke. We'll keep some of Paul's letters, and we'll go that route. And as compelling as that was, the Church of Rome sent him packing very quickly. He actually came in with a big gift, and they refunded all his money, I guess, and kicked him out and sent him back to Egypt. So that was that's important, though. It's important to understand that this is a choice that we make, and that making this choice and understanding Christ as the fulfillment of the Old Testament becomes a challenge, right? Like, we have to continue when more questions are asked about who is Christ, what does it mean to be both God and man, what does it mean to be the Son of God? When we have to use the Old Testament to answer that question, it's difficult, right? Like, it gives us the matrix in which we have to formulate our answers, and it's ultimately good, but it's a choice. That's it. It's a choice, and it's an important one. So, like I said, it's one we take for granted, but we should be careful to realize just that this is a confession of faith. This is also the reason why, if you have Jewish friends, they can read the Old Testament and they don't see Christ in the Old Testament, but we do, because we're choosing to read them. We're choosing to read that book differently, right? We're choosing to see the Old Testament as preaching Christ, and they're choosing to see it as preaching, the history of the Jews, right, of Judaism. And so this is a confession of faith, really, at the beginning of things. It's not careful, critical, textual reading. So that's an important idea. Another passage here at the end of 1 Corinthians from Paul gives us takes us away from the theology and the philosophy and back to the reality of Christian life as he saw it. So in 1 Corinthians 16, Paul says, "Now, concerning the contribution for the saints, as I directed the churches of Galatia, so also are you to do. On the first day of every week, each of you is to put something aside and store it up as he may prosper, so that the contributions need not be made when I come. And when I arrive, I will send those whom you accredit by letter to carry your gift to Jerusalem. If it seems advisable that I should go also, they will accompany me. I will visit you after passing through Macedonia, for I intend to pass through Macedonia, and perhaps I will stay with you even spend the winter, so that you may speed me on my journey wherever I go. For I do not want to see you now just in passing. I hope to spend some time with you if the Lord permits. But I will stay in Ephesus until Pentecost, for a wide door of effective work is open for me, and there are many adversaries. When Timothy comes, see that you put him at ease among you, for he is doing the work of the Lord as I am. So let no one despise him. Speed him on his way in peace, that he may return to me, for I am expecting him with the brethren. As for our brother Apollos, I strongly urged him to visit you with the other brethren, but it was not at all his will to come now. He will come when he has opportunity. Be watchful, stand firm in your faith, be courageous, be strong. Let all that you do be done in love. Now, brethren, you know that the household of Stephanas were the first converts in Achaia. They have devoted themselves to the service of the saints. I urge you to be subject to such men and to every follower and fellow worker and laborer. I rejoice at the coming of Stephanas and Fortunatus and Achaicus, because they have made up for your absence. For they refresh my spirit as well as yours. Give recognition to such men. The churches of Asia send greetings. Aquila and Prisca, together with the church in their house, send you hearty greetings in the Lord. All the brethren send greetings. Greet one another with a holy kiss. I, Paul, write this greeting with my own hand. If anyone has no love for the Lord, let him be accursed. Our Lord come. The grace of the Lord Jesus be with you. May love be with all of you in Christ Jesus. Amen. So these are these closings of Paul's letters. There's it's there's not a lot of theology in here necessarily, but for a church history viewpoint, there's actually quite a lot we can see. Particularly on display here is Paul's sense of networking. To again use kind of a modern term, but this is very much what he's doing, right? He's talking about different churches that he's going to, that he plans to go to, that he's coming from, and he's flat out expecting that the community of Corinth understand and know them. Maybe not on an individual level, but certainly that like there's a familiarity, right? That the Church of Corinth is connected with the Church of Ephesus. That it's connected with the Christians in Macedonia. And also Paul is, he's looking for gifts to bring back to Jerusalem, right? So everything is kind of, spiderweb out from Jerusalem as a central point. And so it's important that Paul's doing this, right? That one single church community is not Christianity. Christianity is bigger, and he's showing that. He's showing that there's all this interconnectedness. He's also having other people come through, Timothy and Apollos. So to maintain this network, there's this kind of itinerant preaching, teaching ministry that's developed in some sort, and Paul is laying that out here. He mentions Aquila and Prisca, noting that there's a church in their house, right? So homes are a place of worship in these Gentile communities. So that's a significant thing. They're not dependent, right? I mean, this is how the faith has moved out of Jerusalem, right, and has moved away from temple worship, right? Is now we're looking at home worship. Paul mentions, of course, all these churches in Asia send greetings. Other tidbits. That's really important, right? Again, there's without trying to read too much into it, just understanding the significance of this networking becomes important later. This becomes important, especially as the disagreements in the church arise. Is this whole networking process is part of how the church works out what we truly believe. Is it has to do with who we believe with. One other tidbit in here is greet each other with a holy kiss. So the holy kiss, right? This is a big Christian tradition for a long time. It's terribly taboo now. There's no form of contact this year, but the holy kiss is significant. I believe that certainly Catholics still exchange like a kiss of peace or a handshake of peace. Right around the time of the Creed in the Catholic Mass. I'm just not familiar enough with Anglican and Lutheran services to know whether this happens. It wouldn't surprise me. Unfortunately, the Orthodox Church has largely done away with this rite as a rite within the liturgy. Just the priests and deacons actually exchange this kiss at that same time, right before the creed is said by the congregation. But still to this day, right, 2,000 years later, this idea of a holy Christian kiss, right, this kiss of peace, still lives on. So that's also worth noting that little comment that Paul makes at the end of the letter is alive and well today.
Deacon, just interrupting, jumping in. We have a popular custom of greeting one another with a tripartite kiss as Christian brothers and sisters when we meet just on the street outside the liturgy. So I think the tradition is maintained somewhat among the Orthodox Christians as well.
Yes, that's certainly true, right? That's definitely true, right? Eastern European tradition, Russians and Greek, Levantine communities, and even into the Arabian Peninsula. That's very common, right? Much more likely to embrace each other, and yes, very Christian, right? A very Christian tradition that has transferred to America. So yes, we do a little better than just kind of a stiff-armed handshake. So yes, that is important, right? To recognize that in addition to the liturgical rite, yes, this does live on amongst Christians. That this is significant, right? That form of contact is significant.
Forgive the interruption. Thank you.
There's also, I believe it was St. John Chrysostom talked about this in one of his homilies once. Right. So Father Paul mentioned that there's this tradition of kissing each other 2 or 3 times on the cheek. I believe St. John Chrysostom once in a sermon mentioned this holy kiss, and was making fun of pagans who only kiss each other on the cheeks instead of on the lips like real Christians. So, so I always think that that's an amusing thought to imagine in the middle of a mass or a liturgy, turning to your neighbor and actually kissing on the mouth. That's it's not the world we live in, right?
Very different times.
Yes, different times. Okay, so a couple snapshots here from more from the New Testament, and then we'll move forward. This one is more on church mission and structure, and passage near and dear to my heart as a deacon. So this is from Acts chapter 6. Now in these days, when the disciples were increasing in number, the Hellenists murmured against the Hebrews because their widows were neglected in the daily distribution. Distribution meaning distribution of food. And the 12 summoned the body of the disciples and said, "It is not right that we should give up preaching the word of God to serve tables. Therefore, brethren, pick out from among you 7 men of good repute, full of the Holy Spirit and wisdom, whom we may appoint to this duty. But we will devote ourselves to prayer and the ministry of the word." And what they said pleased the whole multitude, and they chose Stephen, a man of faith in the Holy Spirit, and Philip and Prochorus, and Nicanor and Timon, and Parmenas, and Nicholas, a proselyte of Antioch. And these they set before the apostles, and they prayed and laid their hands upon them. And the word of God increased, and the number of the disciples multiplied greatly in Jerusalem, and a great many of the priests were obedient to the faith. Okay, so here we're finally seeing this need in the this kind of young juvenile Christian community, this need for different roles, and so the apostles do it, right? They realize that they have a responsibility to teach and preach, and that they're struggling to do that in addition to doing this very physical, practical ministry that the church is responsible to do. And so what they've done then is they've elected chosen seven other men to do specifically that. That, and so they're set aside as deacons, right, as servants, diaconia, and then that way they can go back to focusing on preaching and teaching. It's not right that we should give up the word of God to serve tables. So this is important, right? That we've established 2 roles, and this role of deacon again has become a liturgical ritual role in addition to maintaining its practical value. But certainly here we have the beginnings of this, right, of clergy, so to speak. Not to read too much into it, but to as a sense of differentiation. How are they set aside? They're prayed over, and then the apostles lay their hands upon them. So this laying on of hands is the ordination rite, and that is literally how Orthodox clergy are ordained still to this day. Is literally the bishop lays his hands upon us. So that's significant, right? And so they set aside these 7 men as deacons, and now the mission of the church can carry on, and with a different focus for the apostles and the deacons. Now we can look at 1 Timothy. This is a pretty useful passage here. So Paul's first letter to Timothy, starting at chapter 3. "This saying is sure, if anyone aspires to the office of bishop, he desires a noble task. Now a bishop must be above reproach, the husband of 1 wife, temperate, sensible, dignified, hospitable, an apt teacher, no drunkard, not violent but gentle, not quarrelsome, and no lover of money. He must manage his own household well, keeping his children submissive and respectful in every way. For if a man does not know how to manage his own household, how can he care for God's church? He must not be a recent convert, or he may be puffed up with conceit and fall into the condemnation of the devil. Moreover, he must be well thought of by outsiders, or he may fall into reproach and the snare of the devil. Deacons likewise must be serious, not double-tongued, not addicted to too much wine, not greedy for gain. They must hold the mystery of the faith with a clear conscience. And let them also be tested first. Then if they prove themselves blameless, let them serve as deacons. The women likewise must be serious, no slanderers, but temperate, faithful in all things. Let deacons be the husband of one wife, and let them manage their children and their households well. For those who serve as well as deacon gain a good standing for themselves and also great confidence in the faith, which is in Jesus Christ. I hope to come to you soon, but I am writing these instructions so that if I am delayed, you may know how one ought to behave in the household of God, which is the church of the living God, the pillar and bulwark of the truth. Great indeed, we confess, is the mystery of our religion. He is manifested in the flesh, vindicated in the spirit, seen by angels, preached among nations, believed on in the world, taken up in glory. So obviously the first 2/3 of this passage are more interesting from a historical standpoint, but I included those last verses because it's important to recognize that what Paul is saying is not just his opinion on how things should run, but his opinion on how things should be run is bound up hand in hand with his faith, right? That he can't even give simple instructions about how to elect a bishop without, kind of launching into this whole idea about the church of the living God and who it is that we worship. So that's really powerful, right? That he's, that he has that level of, that integration of faith and practicality that's on display already here in the New Testament. So what do we learn about? We learn about bishops. So this is a new role, and the bishop is. So the word used in Greek is episkopos, and the best translation, I suppose, is like head servant. So you guys know of Joseph from the Old Testament, right? Like Joseph in his dream coat. His role in Potiphar's house was like head servant, right? So this is kind of like the butler role. So not a person who works of their own authority, but within that setting in the master's house, this is the person with authority. So this is the word that's chosen, right? Episkopos. It's always a game figuring out how to translate it, right? So if in English we say bishop, that frustrates people because that word bishop carries all of the imagery and all of the connotations of 2,000 years of hierarchy. But if we don't say bishop, then we say something kind of wonky like head overseer or chief steward. That kind of loses something too, right? It loses the continuity. So that's always a struggle in the translations. But this is the word. This is the word, and without making it anachronistic, this is what Paul is defining it as. He says bishop should be husband of one wife, all around, good moral people, with kind of a typical value set, very similar to what Paul expects of everybody else in the Christian church too. Let's see, any surprises? I don't think there's any surprises among his expectation for the bishops. Doesn't want a recent convert, wants them well thought of by outsiders. That's significant, right? That he's taking into consideration people's, not just people's, moral compass, but also whether they've abided by that in the social setting, right? That these people, these clergy have a public role, and if they've tarnished their public image, or for whatever reason, if they're kind of publicly maligned, they can't do this job well. That's an intelligent thought, right? That's really intelligent that he acknowledges that. So he defines bishops, and then Paul defines deacons. Very similar expectations. He does mention in verse 11 women, and this very likely it's not certain, but it very likely implies female deacons or deaconesses, which was an absolutely recognized and not uncommon position in the church, right? The deacons could be male or female. That has this is likely to, I feel like I'm going to get little chats popping up here on the bottom corner of my screen, which is good, which is fine, but this was part of the older church. Part of the early church was female deacons, and they have fallen by the wayside. We don't very rarely, if ever, ordain women to the diaconate anymore. But the church has never said that we can't. The church has never, the Orthodox Church has never said that there's anything wrong with it, that it's not allowed, that it's a thing best left in the past. It's not like that. It's absolutely a legitimate rule. There's just not been an established practical need. practical need before had mostly to do with baptism. And so then here's that like practical sensibility about the early church is baptism was an adult rite, right? This Christianity that's advocated in the first 300 years is an adult experience, right? You know, as an adult, mature, educated, well, not educated, but anyway, like a mature, grown person, you have this encounter with Christ through other Christians, through his teaching, and then you go through this rite of baptism. And baptism was, yes, and it was also a commandment that women are to speak in church. That's true. So we have female deacons, but also that strange passage from Paul about women should keep silent. But the baptism rite, so, they weren't wearing swimsuits, right? You would be baptized naked. And the church wisely understood that, women should be baptized too, but maybe it wasn't the best thing in the world to have, men helping these naked women get their baptismal gowns back on afterward. And so, certainly there would be the bishop there standing by the font and, saying the prayers and baptizing in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. But then it would be the women deacons who would escort these women away and help them get changed, and so as not to cause a scene, and worse than a scene, right? We don't need that. So as the church shifted toward infant baptisms and bringing more families in and baptizing infants and children, the need for female deacons seemed to have dropped away. They never really defined other positions for the female deacons, and now this is just kind of fallen into disuse. Okay, so other thoughts in this passage? I think that covers it. I would say we have not talked about priests yet. We have bishops and deacons defined, and we don't have priests. And there's two thoughts on that. The first is that the very word priest comes way later. The role of a local leader first takes the name of presbyter, like an elder, right, presbyteros, or president, a presider. And we'll see that here in some of these next texts. But the word priest it's such a Jewish word, actually. It's such a Jewish word that only after Jerusalem has fallen do Christians really start becoming comfortable using this word, and with the risk of all of the Old Testament connotations, right? So the word priest is actually a rather powerful word that comes in later, but the role of priest as presbyter becomes established here pretty quickly, as we'll see. Okay. Okay, so that's all I wanted to do in the New Testament, and now we can start moving to some other texts here. I do have in this handout, I do have some sites where these texts can be found. They're all old enough. Even like the English translations are old enough that they're past any copyright restrictions now. So it's actually very easy. There's a site called earlychristianwritings.org, I believe. I'm sure it's up behind my taskbar here on the screen. I'm not gonna be able to click it. But yeah, like scads of ancient texts in translations from the early 20th century. So they're a little clunky. There's kind of still more Elizabethan English worked in there, but all of this stuff is freely available. And then for those who prefer printed books, you can find bound copies of many of these texts. There's a little volume called, I believe it's the Post-Apostolic Fathers, or Apostolic and Post-Apostolic Fathers, has many of these texts that we'll look at, and many others that we don't have time for. Okay, so the first text that we're going to look at here is called the Didache. The Didache is the 12, the teaching of the 12. And this, as I've got here in my intro, so it's a Greek document, and it's really a challenge for historians. They're not sure if it's because they found lots of copies and fragments of it. It's a short text, but we found very, very old fragments, and the fragments we found have different origins. So they found copies from Egypt, copies from Syria, and along with trying to locate it, there's a difficulty in dating it. Some indications suggest that parts of the text are from, like the 3rd century, late 200s. But some parts of this document are also thought to have originated maybe as early as the late 1st century. So that might actually predate the print of the written gospel text. And parts of this almost certainly predate Ignatius of Antioch, whose writings we'll look at here in a minute. So parts of this seem to be very old, and so which makes it worthwhile looking at to understand church structure, because this is maybe a glimpse of a generation after Paul, what the church looks like. So I've removed the whole first half of the text, which is a little more theological or philosophical in nature, and we'll look at what really informs us about church structure here. So concerning baptism. And concerning baptism, baptize this way. Having first said all these things, baptize in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, in living water. But if you have no living water, baptize in other water. And if you cannot do so in cold water, do so in warm. And if you have neither, pour out water 3 times upon the head in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. But before baptism, let the baptizer fast, and the baptized, and whoever else can. But you shall order the baptized to fast 1 or 2 days before. Okay, so baptism in water and in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Again, this is a common Christian experience, but here it is, within 100 years of, maybe less, maybe within, say, 50 years of Christ's crucifixion, here is instructions in either Egypt or Syria about how to conduct baptisms that feel very, very familiar. Yes, so let's see. All right, so Father Paul is saying that he's got questions, and Zach said, isn't this from the Didache? Yes, it is. And what, okay, so the baptism, there's this word living water, which means running water. The author's not trying to say anything too fancy there, but that's what we're looking at for concerning baptism. And why don't I just stop here, because now I'm super distracted by the chat. Father Paul, what do you have for questions?
Sure. In the order more or less as they were received. First of all, you did see the question from Anne, why are you and the Coptic Orthodox not in communion together? If you'd like to address that now or at the end, take your pick. Okay.
Yeah, so so why are we in the Coptic Orthodox Church not in communion? It's a question that, like, it has layers. There were theological disagreements that came about later, right? I mean, a lot of the break with the Coptic Church, from my understanding, really kind of goes back to Chalcedon, right? So, like 4th, 5th century struggles. But so, these problems start with a theological issue where there's a disagreement on understanding the natures of Christ. How we explain the mystery of Christ is kind of at the heart of it. Is there's this theological disagreement, but then the problem is that disagreement plays out in really practical ways. And so specifically, the way to guarantee that 2 churches who are disagreeing don't get back together is if each of them has a bishop in the same city. The church has this really foundational principle of, the bishop is in charge of his diocese, and the bishop, resides in the city at the cathedral in the city in his diocese. And so if the church goes and puts another bishop there, this like just perpetuates this tension. And so so it's been a long time since I've really read up on the Coptic Church and exactly where the break is and where the problem is. But at this point, that's really it, right? Is that we've got Greek churches with Greek bishops in Africa, and the Coptic Church also has, bishops in, Alexandria, like we both have a bishop of Alexandria, like a Pope of Alexandria. And so that's a problem. Just the same as we would cause a problem if we elect an Archbishop of Rome, right? Like if the Greeks or the Russians put an Archbishop of Rome in the city of Rome, that's like a guarantee that we'll not get back together with the Roman Catholics, right? So that's part of it, right? So these arguments start with a theological disagreement, and this one is a really nuanced disagreement about how Christ is who he is and what it means to be God and man, and how that's expressed in the one Christ. It's kind of the heart of the disagreement, and then it's perpetuated. And in addition to that now, in addition to the problem of bishops and hierarchy kind of overlapping, now the traditions have kind of devolved too. And that's not something we couldn't get over. Having different traditions of worship is something we could get over, but at the same time, it's also it's difficult, right? Just on a practical level, it's very difficult to experience a worship service totally different from what you're used to on any given Sunday. I think, and so that's another piece of it, right? That's the human part of it. Both the bishops conflicting, and then also that understanding of how much my faith and Christ is bound up in how I worship Christ. That's kind of the human side that perpetuates this. Because largely, I think there is a path forward for the theological disagreements now. I think the dialogue has been kicked around for enough centuries now that both sides are understanding each other better, that we could come up with a new formula that both sides agree with. I think there is hope to resolve the theological side, but now there's this really worldly challenge kind of mixed in. So that's my 2 cents on that. I hope it helps. Like I said, ask some others for sure. What else do we have?
Okay, and Zach did point out in the chat that the differences related to the Fourth Ecumenical Council, the Council of Chalcedon, are significant in separation of the Orthodox Byzantine and Oriental Orthodox or Coptic, of one of which is the Coptic Orthodox Church. And Father Andrew Damick, who will be our guest lecturer next week, will be able to address that question for you all as well. So keep that one in mind. From Joni, why can our bishops be widowed but not married currently to their wife?
Yes, yeah, good question. Right on point from 1 Timothy. Yeah, so this was, how do I say this? This was sort of a compromise. This was a bit of a, like, honestly, it was a bit of a political compromise. And it happened after the period of time I wanted to talk about tonight, but it's a fair question and one worth looking at. So the early church has this understanding that bishops can be married. Peter was married, right? We hear about his mother-in-law being sick in the Gospel. And so, so why the change? Why the change? So the best answer is that, you could kind of, kind of bright side it and say that this is a better way, that celibacy and monasticism is maybe a higher calling. I think the truth of it is that this was a difficult compromise that the church made in response to the aftermath of Nicaea. So right in this time, 325, Constantine has called this Ecumenical Council. He has legalized Christianity. With the Edict of Milan, Christianity is now tolerated. He becomes a Christian himself. So all of that happened in the early 300s, but for the 100 years before that, Christians were being persecuted and tortured and killed. And so to be a Christian in the 200s, in the 3rd century, was a dangerous, life-threatening, incredibly brave decision. And now to be a Christian in the 4th century is the in thing, the hip thing to do. And the problem is that there were survivors from the persecution that were still there when all of a sudden all of the, the fair weather fans came back, right? Like it's, it's just like Christmas and Easter at church, right? Like who are all these people that show up once a year? And so there was definitely this attitude of, people who held this church together through its most difficult times are now kind of seeing Christianity kind of being watered down. And this really put it watered down. And at the same time that like it's easy to be a Christian, money is pouring into these churches. Right now, you've got the government coffers opened up, and the church is building. Bishops are basically a governmental function, like mayors, and they're on government payroll soon, and so you can just imagine that people who have lived through a different time, like the excess is, maybe repulsive. Right, certainly frustrating and a big change, and so at this time there was a huge push toward monasticism. This is when it really bloomed. Is all of these people that wanted this like hard, difficult Christianity to really strive and work hard to believe in Christ left. They left the cities and they went out to the deserts. And so now all of a sudden, what do you do, right? If you're the priest at a church or president of the parish council, and all of your best Christians are just up and leaving, and they're going out into the desert and just starting their own communes and saying, this is better. This is the Christianity we want. Not this ritzy, glamorous stuff. So there's this big movement. And then at the same time, the movement out to the deserts, this early monasticism was a movement of laity. It was not a clergy movement. And that was also a problem for the church. And so the church now has Christians who don't have, preachers and teachers involved, who don't have ordained deacons, who are, kind of on the fringe again. And this is a challenge. And so the compromise is this. The compromise is the church insists that these monastic communities that want to strive for this, ascetic life in whatever way will have clergy involved. Right, they'll have clergy somehow involved in these monasteries, but the trade-off is we will draw from the monasteries to get our bishops. Is basically how the compromise worked out. So then the last thing that the councils had to do was kind of unwind First Timothy, and so the canon that does it, I believe it was in the first council at Constantinople, but I'd have to check to be sure. But you can kind of tell that the writers are kind of doing some legal acrobatics to say, Paul's right. We can't say that Paul's wrong, but at the same time, we're going to try something different. And without saying Paul's wrong, we're going to do it differently. It's very difficult, but I think that's kind of a good snapshot of the political reality. Is kind of a compromise that we need the clergy involved in the monastic communities, but the trade-off is we know that some of the most fervent Christians have chosen this monastic life, and so we'll draw from there to be bishops. Since then, the expectation is celibacy, and there's nothing wrong with right. I mean, there's an assumption that since we don't allow a second marriage for clergy, there's an assumption, implied that if a priest's wife dies, that they've kind of adopted the celibate life by force, from that point on. And so that's why we have widowed bishops and celibate monastic bishops. But in any case, the bishop is required to take monastic vows when they're ordained, or immediately before they're ordained. So even the widowed bishops are monks now, period. That's just how it is. Did that cover it?
Okay. Next question from, actually I should say it's just past 8 p.m. So if you would like to have a break for the group, we can do that now, or we can pick up the questions afterward. It's up to
why don't we do that? Why don't we take a break here? Say 7-8 minutes here, kind of stretch out and come back, and yeah, then I'll finish up these questions and we'll start moving back through the text.
Okay, so let's come back at 10 after 8. That'll give us 7 minutes for a short break. Okay?
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing for a few minutes then.
Okay. Okay. It's 8:10. Deacon, can you hear me okay?
I certainly can.
Okay, I think I got you muted there. Nope. So let's begin, regather, and start up again. Do you want to continue with those questions, or do you want to continue with your text?
You think you had just a couple more, or you got a whole handful now?
Well, for some reason, I'm not hearing you, and you are not on mute.
Can you hear me now?
No.
Hang on a sec.
Father, I can hear him.
Oh, that could be because my sound changed. Okay, let's see here. All right. Now I hear you just fine. Yep.
Okay.
I had the wrong headphones on.
How many questions do you have right now?
There are two more questioners. One has 2 questions.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do them.
Okay. So from Luke, when did the vestments come into the picture and why?
Yeah, vestment history. I'll try and give a fairly short answer. So on some level, the vestments are practical. And they also mimic Roman vestments. And so, for instance, the bishop wears an orarion. The orarion is not actually terribly different from where the toga ended up, right? So, like Roman senators had a toga, and at first, like the toga is this kind of, like something from Animal House, right? Like a big Greek frat party, big flowing robe. But that morphed into a garment that was folded up, so it looked more like a scarf that was wrapped around the body in a specific way, and so that right. So the omophore that the bishop wears really kind of parallels a garment that had public civil meaning in a Greek society. So there's that, right? The tunic, the tunic is, the Sticarian robe that all the clergy wear underneath is kind of a fancy tunic, and so this is really kind of what's going on. I would imagine if like the church evolved from 20th, 21st century American culture, we would have kind of ornate suits, right? Or maybe maybe ties and like fancy. So there's real parallels to Rome and to this Greek Roman culture that we just can't see anymore. And so the vestments particularly look strange. The cuffs have a very practical purpose, right? To bind the garments around the hands so that they're not falling into food. The deacon's orarion looks very much like like a waiter's tablecloth that they would hold over their arm, something you'd see almost at a restaurant. So that's really kind of where the vestments come in. When, how early, that's difficult to pin down. It's hard to tell before the councils, right? Before you really get this this church that's sanctioned by the empire. It's very tough to get a real good sense of what they were wearing. A lot of these texts that we're looking at would be the places we would look for these descriptions, and there's just not much about physically what people were wearing. There's a lot more about what they were doing. And so, but two things to look at is if this is a topic of interest, is art. So look at liturgical art, so iconography, and then again, these stories, and particularly stories about saints. And the only challenge, though, is when you're looking at these sources, understand that they're painted or they're written to speak to the audience at the time. And so very often what you'll see is, so like take an icon of, say, St. John Chrysostom, for instance, right? So he's a bishop. In icons of St. John Chrysostom, he looks like a bishop now. The earliest icons of John Chrysostom were painted a couple of centuries after he died. And so we know to a certainty in, say, the year 600, this is how bishops looked. Did they look like that 200 years prior? That's tough to say. But that does get us quite a ways back in the past, right? Same with a hagiography, with a story about a saint. If they're describing the liturgy or the vestments that the saint's wearing, at least it's true contemporary with the writing. Whether or not it's an accurate depiction of the history before that is, kind of anyone's guess. And, we just got to pull on these, textual threads that we can. But that's kind of what I can say. So what were they doing in this early period of the church? What were they wearing? It's hard to say. But when the church became publicly sanctioned and eventually the Roman religion, the garments definitely looked very much like, very, very much paralleled the civil service. So.
Okay, thank you. And I will add that I've heard it said, whether this is a later explanation of the ancient vestments or was in fact the case in the ancient world, I don't know. But the white robe, that's the first thing the priest and deacon put on, is considered to be the baptismal garment, which all Christians would have received at their baptism. So everyone would have been wearing that, not just the clergy. And in the churches in East Africa, people do wear white garments as church clothes, even to this day. Next question, a couple questions from Cynthia. First one, when did the last female deacon serve in the Orthodox Church?
Oh, I would just have to Google that. I'm sorry.
It wasn't yesterday. I think it was quite some time ago, and I don't think the female diaconate was ever universal among the Orthodox communities. It was, as Deacon explained, employed in various places at various times in the ancient world for these practical reasons of ordering the community well. And I think it was also, there are canons which restrict, and Deacon, you can correct me if I'm wrong, there are canons which restrict the female diaconate to eldresses, women past menopause, or I think practically speaking, it was usually wives of clergy who fulfilled the role. So there was a kind of a family ministry aspect to it as well. Though both of those things, though, are subject to further research and correction. I'm not entirely sure of those.
Yeah, you're right though. There is an age restriction. It's either 40 or 45. Absolutely.
Okay, and then Cynthia also asks a great question. Another great question. In the Roman Orthodox Church, I believe the Pope helps oversee who becomes a bishop. Roman Catholic Church. Did I say Roman Orthodox? Interesting. How is the process different in the Orthodox Church? Which priests are involved in the selection nomination process? All, or is there a committee?
Sure. So this actually, I mean, this takes the class past my defined lesson and into much more what's on point for next week, right? I think next week, isn't it like creeds and councils or something? And so very much from the 3rd century, late in the 3rd century and onward, the church was trying to answer these questions and spent a lot of time and energy having council meetings and laying down laws, right? Like laying down canon law, which isn't meant to be as legalistic as like the Justinian Code or, the Code of Federal Regulations or something. But still very clear prescriptive guidance for the church to follow. And so they legislated this, how bishops are picked. And the basic idea is that a bishop is chosen from ideally 3 or more other bishops. 2 bishops can pick a bishop, but the expectation is that a council or a synod of 3 or more bishops would pick another bishop. Now, in the Orthodox churches that are established in America, there are varying levels of input that's taken from the laity and from lower clergy, from priests and deacons, while the Synod of Bishops is looking for another bishop, or when the Synod of Bishops is looking to elevate one of their bishops to be the leader. So the OCA has a metropolitan kind of at the head of the Orthodox Church of America, and the Synod of American Bishops does listen. They have a council of clergy and laity whose input they listen to when choosing, the next figurehead, so to speak, the next metropolitan. That said, they are under absolutely zero obligation to listen to anybody except fellow bishops. That is how it is. So that's it's a really interesting topic, one that I would be happy to spend more time on, in a different setting. But yeah, the whole exercise of choosing bishops and then the authority that the bishops have is incredibly absolute, really, within their diocese, but they're also bound by their diocese, and that's equally interesting, right? So this whole idea of electing and choosing new bishops is one aspect of it that's unique. Another is that the bishop alone is in charge of all the priests and deacons in his diocese, but the bishop is not allowed to travel to another diocese without an invitation from that other diocese, the other diocesan bishop. So the interaction of bishops is a very difficult topic, and at like writ large, this is where the problems exist between Rome and Constantinople. Is how do we legislate the interactions between the top 2 bishops? So anyway, simple answer is it should be 3 or more bishops choosing the next bishop and giving him to his diocese.
Okay, that's all for the questions at this time.
All right.
Unless hang on a second. I think a couple came in while we were chatting, so let me just catch up here.
All right, well, I'm going to move on while you're looking
okay.
over it.
I'll go ahead and collect these recent questions if we have time at the end. Okay.
Okay, so back to the Didache. So we looked at the passage about baptism. They have a passage of fasting and prayer. But let none of your fasts be with the hypocrites, for they fast on the 2nd and 5th day of the week. Rather, fast on the 4th day and the preparation day. Do not pray like the hypocrites, but rather as the Lord commanded in his gospel, like this: Our Father who art in heaven, ... Pray this 3 times each day. So this is interesting on a few different levels. First, don't fast like the hypocrites. Hypocrites being an impolite way to refer to Jews who would fast on Mondays and Thursdays. Instead, Christians here are called to fast on Wednesdays and Fridays. So this is the Wednesday and Friday fast. It's almost as old as the church itself. It is still followed. It's still followed by the Orthodox Church to this day, with only a couple exceptions throughout the year. Almost every Wednesday and Friday are designated fast days. So no meat or dairy, no meat or meat products are intended to be consumed on those days. The expectation that your food intake is restricted. This is very old Christianity. The other interesting note here is one that can slip by if you're not looking for it. So this passage, when they say the Our Father, those ellipses there at the end, the ... that's in the text. That's in the original text, which means which means that whoever's reading this should first have received at least the Gospel of Matthew, right? And that's important, right? Like this is important for kind of piecing together these little pearls, to string them together and tell the story of Christian history. This Didache that's being distributed is meant to complement New Testament texts. At least the Gospel of Matthew or Luke, I suppose. Right? This is an expectation that not only have you read it once, but that you understand that the Lord's Prayer, Our Father, is part of your Christian life. So that's a really powerful implied idea here, that the New Testament is in circulation already, or if not the New Testament, the prayers within it, right? That this prayer has preceded these other teachings. About the Eucharist. Now concerning the Eucharist, give thanks this way. First, concerning the cup, we thank thee, our Father, for thy holy vine of David thy servant, which you made known to us through Jesus thy servant. To thee be glory forever. And concerning the broken bread, we thank thee, our Father, for the life and knowledge which you made known to us through Jesus thy servant. To thee be the glory forever. Even as this broken bread was scattered over the hills and was scattered together and became one, so let thy church be gathered together from the ends of the earth into thy kingdom. For thine is the glory and the power through Jesus Christ forever. But let no one eat or drink of your Eucharist unless they have been baptized in the name of the Lord. For concerning this also the Lord has said, give not that which is holy to the gods. And after you are filled, give thanks this way. We thank thee, Holy Father. ... Okay, so here's the Eucharist, right? And now we have some kind of proto ritual developing. So there's bread in a cup. There's separate elements we can see in this text, and there's a prayer being said for each. There's lots of talk amongst historians about exactly how much or how little the Eucharistic meal is meant to resemble a Passover Seder or something like that. Kind of, there are ritual Jewish meals that involve bread and wine as separate elements, specifically the Passover Seder. But clearly here, there's more going on than just a communal meal. So in the book of Acts and in Paul's letters, he's instituting, Paul's instituting some sort of ritual Eucharist, but not as clearly as this is. So this is already a shift towards something a little closer to what most of us would experience at a Sunday Eucharistic service, right? At a Eucharistic Mass. The prayers are a little different. There's not, we don't see the symbolism particularly with Christ's crucifixion. That's interesting that the bread and wine aren't paralleling that. But regardless, there's prayers being said, and that's significant. And then again, there's a Thanksgiving prayer. We thank thee, Holy Father, ... So here's another prayer that we're all supposed to know. I don't think I know this one, so I'm not 100% sure at all what prayer that's referring to, but clearly this is significant, right? There's implied knowledge in this text. Christian assembly on the Lord's Day. But every Lord's Day, this is Sunday, every Lord's Day gather yourselves together and break bread and give thanksgiving after having confessed your sins to keep your sacrifice pure. For this is that which is spoken by the Lord. In every place and time, offer to me a pure sacrifice, for I am a great king, says the Lord, and my name is wonderful among the nations. So here again is this expectation that Christians are assembling on Sunday, right? This is hasn't changed, hasn't changed since the beginning, but clearly it's set aside. And what are we assembling for? For giving thanks, for breaking bread, confessing our sins in the group, and conducting the service. And then last, bishops and deacons. Appoint therefore for yourselves bishops and deacons worthy of the Lord, meek men, not lovers of money, and truthful and proved, for they also render to you the service of prophets and teachers. there's not too much to dwell on with that last passage, although the roles of prophets and teachers, there is a bit of a shift, right? If you read, if you read Paul's epistles pretty carefully, there's different functions he imagines in the church, right? Teachers and preachers and prophets, people who speak in tongues. And this is starting to shift, right? So now we clearly have bishops and deacons, and like I mentioned, we have this missing element of the presbyter, which we'll get to soon. Okay, let's pause for a minute here. Questions on the Didache, or I'll take another question or two to kind of help catch up.
Okay. So this is a clarification from earlier when you spoke about the rise of monasticism. From Megan and Andrew, did you say that monasticism is a higher calling than marriage? Are they not considered equally high?
I did say that, and I don't say that as something that I believe or that's advocated and universally taught by the church. I said that as kind of one position that one would take. To be perfectly honest with you, so I would come down on the side of yes, marriage is very much, except in one way, it's very much an ascetic lifestyle, right? Like it's not easy to call to be married, but I'm also I've read enough to get the sense that that certainly monks, and so I'm married. And so I'll speak very highly of marriage and the virtues of it, and I hope that all of you who are married do too. And I have nothing against monks, but I would also expect them to see their own calling as a higher calling, and that's in fact what we get, right? So monks tend to write about monasticism in glowing terms, and I mean, I did read a study once of somebody who took time to put together a list of all of the married saints and try and kind of tease out this theology of like, does the church have something to say about marriage and how marriage works, with sainthood and sanctity. And unfortunately, the author's conclusion was it seems like the married saints are saints despite having been married. So the fact is that yes, that viewpoint exists, right? That absolutely exists. And at that time, I think the point isn't about marriage versus monasticism as much as monasticism versus city church life, and monasticism being this higher calling of ascesis and asceticism of giving up something. So not as a contrast to marriage, but as a contrast to city Christianity with this call out to the desert. So I hope that clarifies that.
Good. And one last question at this time from Josh and Erica. When did observance of the Sabbath change from Saturday to Sunday?
Yes. So technically it didn't. It didn't. The Sabbath in church definition is absolutely 100% Saturday. That is the Sabbath still. I'm not exactly sure how in English that notion crept in that Sunday is the Sabbath. It's like a new Sabbath, right? But like 100%, the church teachings and the Orthodox ritual cycle, the liturgical cycle through the week and through the year, maintains Sunday and Saturday as different days and maintains Saturday as the Sabbath day. So it didn't totally change. Of course, Christians celebrate on the Lord's Day because on the first day of the week before the dawn, the tomb was empty, right? And so that's why we would celebrate on Sunday, the Lord's Day, the first day of the week. That's why we would call it the Lord's Day. The Sabbath is still significant. It's still significant for Old Testament reasons, and it's and like I said, for as much as we've kind of blurred the vocabulary, and you're not, and I don't mean to suggest that that's not a very common view. It's absolutely a very common view that most people think that the Sabbath now refers to Sunday for Christians. It's very common. But it's not true, and the church maintains Saturday as a distinct day, and there's different ways to look at this. But on every Saturday throughout the church year, and on every Sunday throughout the church year, you can have a liturgy. The weekdays, that's not always true. It's not always true, but you can always have a Eucharistic liturgy on every Saturday and every Sunday. They're different. They're given over to different types of celebrations. The hymns are very deliberately focused differently on Saturdays and Sundays. But yeah, no, the church worship cycle works very hard to hold both of them in high esteem. Actually, both days of our weekend as significant. So I know what you're asking, and I know I totally didn't exactly answer it. But I hope it helps anyway, to realize that no, absolutely in the Orthodox Church, the Sabbath is Saturday, and Saturday is holy. Maybe not kept the way that the Jews keep it, but definitely a holy day separate from Sunday.
Good answer, Deacon. Some of the fathers do refer to the Sabbath as transferring to, being our Sabbath, the day of the Lord's resurrection. But as you rightly point out, the Sabbath as the day on which God rested is never eliminated in the church's understanding. It's the day when Christ rests in the tomb, and it's the day, as you say, when we always have some liturgical, Eucharistic celebration, and in a sense, the Lord's Day, the day of resurrection, the new Sabbath, if you will, is a kind of extension of that seventh day into an eighth day of the week, which also falls on the first day of the week. So there's a mystical, theological sense. But there are fathers who refer to the Sunday as, if I'm not mistaken, as the Sabbath day. So there is a tradition within the broader tradition of making the transfer. I think in Western Christianity, the emphasis is stronger, that Sunday is a day of rest. There's a pious tradition of doing no work on a Sunday. I know people advise that among Orthodoxy and among the Holy Fathers, but I don't think it ever took root as such a firm kind of tradition of piety. So that's my 2 cents. Forgive me for jumping in there.
Thank you. Okay. All right, so I'm going to move on here. So the next figure that's worth noting is Ignatius of Antioch. So Ignatius was a bishop of Antioch. He was a student of, was he a student of Polycarp, who was a student of John? Was he a student of John? Anyway, he basically studied under, in the school, so to speak, of John the Evangelist. And so definitely within a generation or two of a disciple of Christ. And
he may have even met, I'm sorry, this is Father Paul. He may have even met Christ when he was a boy. And he's very popular. So he's a bishop in Antioch, and in the year 110 he was arrested for being a Christian, and sentenced to death and brought to Rome, where he was executed. The tradition holds that he was fed to the lions, fed to the wild beasts in Rome. I guess prison was, the capital, like the death row, was a different experience back then, because on his journey from Antioch to Rome, it was a long trip, but he received guests and wrote letters and gave these letters to his guests. And so many, I think, if not all, most of the writings we have from him were while he was under the sentence of execution on this journey to his death in Rome. He's writing these letters to all these churches in mostly in his diocese, and leaving stuff behind. He's a really significant figure for several reasons, right? He's an early martyr of the church, right? Gives his life for his faith.
He's a bishop and an influential figure. He expounds on the church's theology and on the identity of Christ in a really significant way. But for our purposes, he does leave us another glimpse into kind of the growing church. And I'm not gonna read all of these passages here, but I will read this first one in his letter to the Trallians. In the 2nd chapter, Ignatius says, "For when you are subject to the bishop as to Jesus Christ, it is evident to me that you are living not in accordance with human standards, but in accordance with Jesus Christ, who died for us in order that by believing in his death, you might escape death. It is essential, therefore, that you continue your current practice and do nothing without the bishop, but be subject also to the council of presbyters as to the apostles of Christ, Jesus Christ, our hope in whom we shall be found, if we so live. Furthermore, it is necessary that those who are deacons of the mysteries of Jesus Christ please everyone in every respect. For they're not merely deacons of food and drink, but ministers of God's church. Therefore, they must avoid criticism as though it were fired. Similarly, let everyone respect the deacons as Jesus Christ, as they should respect the bishop, who is a model of the Father, and the presbyters as God's council and the band of the apostles. Without these, no group can be called a church. I am sure that you agree with me regarding these matters, for I have received a living example of your love, and still have it with me in the person of your bishop, whose very demeanor is a great lesson and whose gentleness is his power. I think that even the atheists respect him." Okay, so Ignatius clearly identifies 3 roles of clergy, right? He's the bishop, the presbyters, and the deacons. And so now we have this tripartite, this 3-tiered clergy model that's preserved still to this day in Orthodox Christianity. Ignatius's real contribution here is to give this ecclesiastical structure a theological overlay. And once he does this, the church won't move away from it, right? Like this argument that he makes here to the Trallians really cements this structure. And this is really held in check any desire to make, like another rank, right? To suggest that an archbishop or a metropolitan or or a pope or something like some fourth position, right? This is like a really good snapshot of what we do and why we do it, and how what we're doing here on earth mirrors the heavens above, right? And mirrors God's plan for salvation. So how does Ignatius lay it out? He actually says that the deacons among us are representations of Jesus Christ. Let everyone respect the deacon as Jesus Christ. The bishop is the model of the Father, and the presbyters, somewhat surprisingly, are mirrors of the apostles. So the presbyters as apostles, the bishop as the Father, and the deacons as Jesus Christ. So now we've kind of got this, this heavenly eschatological, sense of what we're doing, and that really, like I said, that really cements it. And then, without these, no group can be called a church, right? So not only is this how we're going to be organized, but we can't exist as a church without it. So that's a powerful idea, right? We have evolved now. This passage, it shows an evolution, I think, a continuity, no question, a continuity, but I think an evolution from where we started in Acts. All right, there are some questions in the chat. Elias is asking, does it have to do with the ancient Judaism story? Oh, yeah,
those were posted during the discussion about this transfer of the Sabbath.
Oh, yes. The evening thing is interesting. During most of the church year, the Orthodox liturgical day starts in the evening. That's not a hard and fast thing. It doesn't. During Lent, the day actually starts in the morning. But that we definitely also not only keep the Sabbath as a separate notion, but also start our days the evening prior with the Vespers, the 9th hour and Vespers service. I'm going to move on here to some other snippets. So this is so that was Ignatius of Antioch. And these texts are from Justin Martyr. Justin was a philosopher in Rome, a little, a generation or maybe 2 generations after Ignatius, right? He died somewhere in the 160s. And he also made a lot of significant theological contributions, but sprinkled in there are some interesting tidbits about what worship was like for him in his Christian experience. So again, not going to read them all. I'll start at 65. After washing the one who has believed, we lead him to where the brethren are assembled and we offer prayers. After prayers, we greet one another with a kiss. Then there is brought to the president of the brethren bread and a cup of water and a cup of wine mixed with water, and taking them, he sends up praise and glory to the Father of the universe through the name of the Son and the Holy Spirit, and offers thanksgiving, Eucharisto. All the people present assent by saying amen. Then the deacons give a portion of the Eucharized bread and wine and water to the people. And this food among us is called among us Eucharist, for it is only for believers who have received the washing, and it is for the remission of sins, and who live according to Christ's teaching. For we receive these things as Christ handed down, for the apostles and the Memoirs composed by them, which are called Gospels, thus handed down what was commanded them, that Jesus took bread and having given thanks, said, "Do this for my memorial, this is my body." And likewise he took the chalice and having given thanks, said, "This is my blood," and gave it to them alone. So here again, right, we're seeing this ritual worship. It's largely similar to what was talked about in the Didache. Now Justin is saying that, he's showing continuity all the way back with the apostles. Also significant here is his mention of memoirs. So in his worship service, not only is it this Eucharistic service where they prepare ritual bread and wine, and in his case also water, for everybody, but before that they read the memoirs. They read the memoirs of the apostles, which are the Gospels, right? So here again, this is very familiar for Christians, right? Our Sunday worship experience also often includes teachings from the New Testament, and this was already in place in around 150 in Rome. Justin also, you guys can read this on your own, also talks a bit about baptism here at 61, and at 67 talks more about Sunday, the first day of the week. We are running short on time, so I'll breeze past this. Other good sources for history are, external viewpoints. And so Pliny the Younger was a governor and wrote a letter to the Emperor Trajan around the time of Ignatius, kind of in that early 2nd century time. He was noticing this growing problem of Christianity in his town and wanted to know what to do with them. Actually arrests and tortures 2 deaconesses in the process. But that's interesting, right? To get a sense of how Christians are being perceived on the outside. And it's not bad, right? For people who aren't especially sympathetic to Christians, they're also no fools, right? They pick up on the fact that we're not murdering babies on Sunday morning, right? That, like, it's bread and wine that they're eating, even if they say it's somebody's body and blood. So it's worth a look. Also worth a look, but I'm going to skip past it, is there's a really beautiful tomb from a person named Avercius Marcellus. This pushes us right to the edge of the 3rd century. Obviously a rich guy for a tomb this size, but has this beautiful inscription and talks about all his journeys. And this guy was all over the world. He was in Rome, Nispris, crossed the Euphrates. Trying to see some of the highlights, but really, Hierapolis really provides an incredible snapshot of how widespread Christianity was already in 200 years. And so widespread that he could travel, and the Christians he encountered were familiar enough, right? Like their worship was familiar enough. So the same endeavor that was undertaken by Paul has obviously played out for, another 150 years and was working. Avercius also talked about how he would bring writings with him. And so that's also significant, right? That these Gospels, these epistles from the New Testament weren't just mailed out from a central office, right? They were brought by people. And so this exchange of documents is an exchange of faith, right? And this is how we're all literally staying on the same page with each other. Okay, so coming right to the edge of the 3rd century, so around the year 200, this is a fun passage here. This is a calendar fight, I believe. Yes. So there's a disagreement about when to celebrate Easter. The first option is to celebrate it on a Sunday, the Sunday after Passover, and the alternative is to celebrate it on the day of Passover, regardless of whatever day Passover falls on. Or, like the 3rd day of Passover, regardless of the day of the week. And so particularly in what's nowadays Turkey and in Asia Minor, this tradition of celebrating with the Jews on Passover was prevalent, and that was not well liked by Christians in Rome. So Bishop Polycrates writes this letter to Victor, the Bishop of Rome, so Victor, Pope of Rome, although they weren't using that title. So Polycrates says, "We therefore observe the genuine day of the Lord's Pascha, for in Asia great lights have fallen asleep, who shall rise again in the day of the Lord's appearing, including one of the 12 apostles who sleeps in Hierapolis, and his 2 aged virgin daughters. Also John, who rested on the bosom of our Lord, who was also a priest, a martyr, and a teacher, who was buried in Ephesus, and Polycarp of Smyrna, a bishop and martyr, Theresias, Sagarius, Papyrus, and Melito. All of these observe the 14th day of Passover, according to the gospel, deviating in no respect, but following the rule of faith. So I, Polycrates, like my 7 predecessors, will observe the day when the Jews throw out the leaven, for we ought to obey God rather than men." So this is how people still behave, right? When you're making a social plea, he's name dropping. Polycrates is name dropping. And to some effect, right? These are revered figures that he's citing in his defense. And this is also significant in the same way that I talked earlier about how the church really, it's so foundational that we have to appeal to the Old Testament, to Scripture to understand Christ's identity. This appeal to history is really significant. It's not carte blanche. It's just because something was done in the past doesn't necessarily make it right, but it does give us pause before we go changing things. And so Polycrates, this is kind of one small glimpse of apostolic succession and apostolic tradition, right? Is that he was handed this faith, and the teaching of Christ, like the Christ that he encounters through these people, is authentic. And so therefore, why would he deviate from his method of worship? And so that leads to kind of an axiom in Orthodoxy, right? Lex orandi, lex est credendi is how it would be said in Latin, right? The way we worship is what we believe. And so these ideas are from the beginning really bound together. And so Polycrates is just giving this example of, I'm really hesitant to change what day I celebrate Easter on because this faith has shown me Christ. Victor's not having it. And so Victor actually excommunicates the Asian church. And then a third person gets involved, Bishop Irenaeus, who is from Asia Minor, but moved to Lyon in southern France right after a really bad persecution, actually. He gets involved too and plays the peacemaker here and plays it really well. And this is Irenaeus, right? He's an incredible figure who we don't have nearly enough time to talk about, but he writes a letter to Victor too. And he says, this diversity existing among those who observe 14 Nisan and we who do not is not a matter that has sprung up in our times, but long ago among those before us. Those presbyters and bishops before us, though perhaps not showing sufficient strictness of practice, nevertheless maintained peace. And until now, we have maintained peace with one another, for the very differences establish the unanimity of our faith. Furthermore, dear Victor, your predecessors as presbyters and bishops who did not observe 14 Nisan still sent the Eucharist to those churches who kept the Passover on the day of the Jews. They communed with each other and in the church. Then they went apart in peace with the church at peace. So that's a nice inclusive message. You know, and it's something to think about, right? There's clearly this pull toward, you know, kind of narrowing, you know, drawing lines and defining what's outside of Christian belief. And this, you know, this glimpse from Irenaeus was a nice one to kind of say, okay, let's not get carried away here. Now, this is from a person, though, Irenaeus, who had no qualms whatsoever going after people who taught wonky, untrue things. And he wrote an entire expose on, it was against the heresies, is what it's called, against the heresies. And so he spent years researching all of these crazy Christian teachings, particularly that were coming out of Egypt, but weird ideas where Christ was like one God in a huge pantheon. Just some really bizarre stuff. And he, like, one by one debunked it all and defended this faith in Christ as revealed through the scriptures. That you know, this is the faith he was handed. This is the faith we still believe. In that process, he does slip in another real pillar to our teachings here, which I've got here as an excerpt, chapter 9.9. Or actually, even better, 9.8. At one point, he's arguing against these heresies and talks about the Gospels. And he says it's not possible that the Gospels can be either more or fewer in number that they are. For since there were 4 zones in the world which we live and 4 principal winds, while the church was scattered throughout the world, and the pillar in the ground of the church is the gospel and the spirit of life, it is fitting that we should have 4 pillars. And then, you know, he expands this argument against all of his enemies. Now, this is... you know, this isn't this isn't science, right? This is just clever arguing, you know, his position and proof texting, really, like he's proof texting with nature. But what's important though is that before this was not established. There are lots more than 4 gospels to choose from, and Irenaeus is one of the early saints to put down on pen and paper the fact that we're committing to these 4, not to 5, not to 3. But you know, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are who we're going with. So this is one more powerful notion. We are basically out of time, so I can't spend any more time on some of the other passages for Irenaeus. I also included in this packet, and had no intention of really reading it, the Martyrdom of Polycarp. So that was the last element here of the early church, is the idea of martyrdom, starting with the Deacon Stephen and moving through the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd centuries, especially in the 3rd century. The church experienced some very, very difficult persecutions. And so how to make sense of that? Well, write about it. And so a tradition grew in the church to not only treat these martyrs as holy people, but really to cast the entire specter of martyrdom and this arrest and execution of these Christians in kind of apocalyptic terms. And so the literature is really beautiful, and there's a lot of overlaying of like, you know, divine wars between God and the devil, or you know, kind of overlaying gospel imagery with the martyrs who are dying. And so that's one other feature of this time period that really blooms. And that really does, and so that takes us, and then into the 3rd century. Now the church is big, and the networks are established, and the saints are getting more comfortable calling out the teachings we don't like, and so now the next step seems to be laying down guidelines for the faith. And so starting in the 3rd century, we start seeing more assemblies of bishops, assemblies of clergy, assemblies of great teachers, trying to hash out both our faith and the rules that we want to live by, the practical rules we want to live by. So that is my early glimpse here of the church through a few of these primary texts. I hope you guys find them a little more accessible after looking at them together for a couple hours. And we'll get you this packet, and please feel free to go over it. And I imagine that my email is available to you guys somewhere, so we can certainly dialogue about this more. I mean, I love it, right? Like, no one ever wants to talk about this stuff since seminary, so every once in a while it's fun.
If you want to post your email in the chat for those who are here, they can get it from you that way. And then you can ask Father Perry to share it to the full group. So I think we're right at 9 p.m. So thank you, everybody. Next week, as I said, we will have Father Andrew Stephen Damick, who is the author of Orthodoxy and Heterodoxy, one of the books that's been suggested for this course. He's also the creator of numerous podcasts. Most recently, he released a podcast last Wednesday, an interview with Rod Dreher, the conservative columnist, which is called Orthodox Engagement. And it looks to be an interesting interview series with various people of various opinions about Orthodoxy and the contemporary world. So that's one to keep an eye out for, as well as Father Andrew's Lord of the Spirits podcast, together with Father Stephen DeYoung, who's a PhD in Hebrew studies, which is also a very interesting recent offering from Father Andrew. That's enough of a plug from me for Ancient Faith radio and podcasts, as well as Ancient Faith Ministries. Full disclosure, I am the spiritual advisor to Ancient Faith Ministries and a member of the board of directors. So this has been a little plug for you all to check it out, ancientfaith.com. Father Deacon, do you have any last thoughts? Anything you want to close us with prayer, perhaps?
Sure, we could close with prayer. We could say prayer to the Theotokos in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. It is truly meet to bless you, Theotokos, ever blessed and most pure, and the Mother of God, more honorable than the cherubim, more glorious beyond compare than the seraphim. Without defilement, you gave birth to God the Word. True Theotokos, we magnify you, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
For you are God, are blessed unto the ages of ages. Amen. Thank you, Deacon.
Do you want me to stick around here? Obviously, if you guys want to leave, go ahead. But if there's questions, I don't mind sticking around here.
All right, I'm happy to leave the meeting open then. I will step away, but Father Deacon, I'll check back in a few minutes and shut the meeting down if there's no more activity. But thank you for making yourself available to everybody.
Sure.
Okay. Good night.
And for everyone who's leaving, have a good night. Thanks for your time. All right, I was told once only to wait 7 seconds for questions, so I think we've hit that. So let's call it a night. Feel free to send me an email, and thanks again, everybody.